Welcome to week 4. We are on day 1, day 16 of the overall program. We are making progress. Our first week, we focused on the program overview, habits, and value, and motivation for ourselves, and how we make things more accessible for ourselves. We then moved on, and the second week and second main habit is motivating and making things accessible for our team members, empowering our teams, because these two aspects are crucial in achieving the behaviors that we need to achieve and the outcomes that we want to achieve. The third week is great. I can motivate, I can make things more accessible for myself and others, but what am I leading them towards? Like, what are the right things? And based upon the kinds of outcomes we need to create, we need to exceed the expectations of our stakeholders, and some of those people are career gatekeepers. And do that by defining targets in a systematic way that's repeatable, that can exceed expectations, and understand the adjustments that we need to make to improve the experience of working with someone in a role, really us, and then communicating out those commitments. So the selection of exceeding those outcomes, some initial thoughts on how we're going to get from A to B or B to A. We talked about starting with the end in mind and working back and creating a plethora of steps and options that we can take and aligning them to our accessibility and motivation to increase the probability that we're actually going to hit those targets. All these things, all those outcomes that we selected, how we choose to get there becomes our strategy. Now we need to execute the strategy. Now we need to implement it. And this week, we're going to focus on the execution. We're going to continue this exceeding expectations arc, and we want to scale our execution. So, and increase the amount of outcome and the number of outcomes, and scaling our execution to do that, our own direct execution. And next week, we will talk about like kind of indirect execution and working through others in order to scale our execution. So we want to implement strategies in doable and systematic ways that make us more successful reliably. Again, that's the key word throughout the program, is just this consistent ability to exceed expectations. And we've set the targets through last week, and now we just need to hit them. So what are the things that we're going to uncover for this week and discuss, and that you should feel free to raise in mentorship conversations? It's like, what is real productivity? What does that mean? What are the roles that we play as individuals? There is a pipeline or a demand side of our time, and how can we be reactive and annihilated, quite frankly, or be more proactive and take control of our own destiny, and like identifying what those things are, what those triggers are. And then an approach to maximizing our commitment to the roles that we're playing through time boxing. You may be familiar with this, perhaps you've used it. I'm going to take a little bit of a unique take on it, something that has been highly effective for me. And then while we are blazing that trail through our execution, working towards those defined targets for exceeding expectations, making sure that we are documenting some level of history of this, making an investment there to ensure that we can use that information in the future. And we'll talk about using that information in the future next week, some of the applications of that. All right, so understanding real productivity or time quality. What does that exactly mean? So let's look at productivity first. This is just a quick definition from Wikipedia, or part of the definition. The effectiveness of productive effort, especially in industry, as measured in terms of the rate of output per unit of input. We use similar terms in our value definition. What are you inputting? Then there's the throughput piece, like the actual effort and work that you're doing to result in the output. And here it's like a very flat, unnuanced example of that. Workers have boosted productivity by 30%. Then the question becomes, in terms of understanding that real productivity and time quality, is how do you yield more output using the units that you have available, right? So units or time, the quantity of time. And I also like to refer that to time being the currency of our life, to reflect the value of our time. But really understanding that just this hyper focus on throwing more time at something has diminishing returns. There's been studies done around productivity that show just simply spending more time, every unit of time invested beyond a certain amount of time for a person, it's just diminished returns over those incremental units, and it has a compounding effect. Like, just think about it, like in real person terms. Think about, you get to a certain amount of time that you've invested in a week, and you just start to fatigue, and you get tired, and you get stressed, and you get resentful. You have your own mechanism for understanding that. Now imagine that at scale across tons of people, and how that can negatively impact a business. That's why, for me, my view on productivity and what has been crucial in my achievement of exceeding outcomes and what you can adapt is really introducing time quality. So how motivated we show up. When we show up to that time, what's the role that we're playing? How accessible are the things that we need to do within that allotted time? So looking at ways to get more output from your inputs, right? I talked about just like throwing more time at it is not sustainable. It is not healthy. I'm sure there may have been an experience in your life, whether professionally or personally, where you just felt like no matter how much you worked, you weren't making any gains, and it became frustrating. This is an example of simply throwing more time at it doesn't necessarily create solutions or enable you to implement solutions. So what can we look at? Like things that we've already been doing as part of this program. I already talked about it, the motivation and the accessibility, not only for yourself. Is your team motivated? How accessible are the things for your team members? What do you do to make things more accessible? What do you do to motivate yourself and others more? We talked about that. That improves the quality of the time quantity that you're investing or spending. What you're directing all that time quality and time quantity towards. Have we chosen the right targets? Last week, we talked all about targets and picking the right targets. And then different roles that we play. And I don't necessarily mean your functional role, but your role as someone in that job, or different roles that you play to other people in a job or in your personal life, and the balance of those roles and how it impacts any increment of time that you're investing when you go to work against that time. It's crucial. We'll talk a little bit more about the roles that we play a little bit later. And then scaling using frameworks, which is something that we'll cover next week, which is more indirect leadership. So using strategies that you created and the methods and the processes for implementing that, and then allowing other people to use them and to adapt them, and you kind of being the product manager of that and being able to reflect the outcomes of those additional implementations of your strategy. You're increasing the outputs for any given input that you have. And then finally, like how you choose to communicate. We talk about alignment in this program earlier on, and how we can be direct and we can be empathetic. So telling people like the ultimate form of kindness, making sure that we're clear in the expectations that we're setting while also being equitable through empathy and understanding the challenges that people are facing. This increases the time quality. It makes the most of any increment of time that you're investing, and then allows you not to suffer things like burnout. So for today, I want you to reflect on time quality and real productivity as being a function of minutes or hours or days, weeks, years of time, and the quality of that time. And thinking about things that we discussed and ways in which you can improve the quality of time for any increment of time that you choose to invest. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. We'll go further into the execution of strategy and the efficient and effective execution of strategy when that strategy is under your direct leadership. See you tomorrow.